Okay, so I have 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll go ahead and get started with our presentation. A few housekeeping things before we get started. There is a copy of the slide presentation available in the GoToWebinar user interface. You can just download that right there. We do also have captioning available for today's presentation. You'll find the link to the captioning browser in the chat box. We also will be recording today's presentation, and tomorrow you should be receiving a link to the recording. So if you need to follow up or if you want to have a look at it again. And let's see. Great, we have a really great turnout today. I'm really pleased to see you all here. So let's go ahead and get started with our presentation. My name is Megan Testerman. I am the Psychology and Counseling Librarian here at Walden. And today I'm joined by Julie James, who is one of our Health Sciences librarians. Julie, would you like to say hello?
Hey, everyone.
So Julie's going to be in the background today. She's going to be helping me make sure that everything goes smoothly, and she's also going to be here to help answer questions. If you do have questions during the presentation, feel free to write them into the question box, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll go through and we'll look and see if there's anything that we can discuss together as a group. So today we're going to talk about how to find a gap in the literature, and my goal for today is to give you all a really clear roadmap of how to approach exploratory research to identify a gap in regards to your topic. So I'm going to give you a little bit of theory behind it, and then I'm also going to show you kind of a really practical, quick and dirty approach in the library databases to help get you started with that search process. So I'm going to start by giving you a really quick rundown of how to find a gap, and I'm going to do this in 5 easy steps. So the first thing that we're going to do when we're trying to find a gap in the literature is that we're going to start with our area of interest. So this is a really broad level approach. So let's say, for example, that you work in a school and you work with teenagers a lot, you work with high schoolers, and you're really passionate about substance abuse problems among teenagers and looking for solutions. So let's just start with that. Let's say that you're doing your dissertation level research, you're trying to find a gap on this topic. Let's start with that really broad drug use among teenagers. This is something that if we type this into the database, we would probably bring back thousands of results. So step 2 is that we're going to use exploratory research to examine the current research in the field. And at this point, you're going to get a lot of results, but don't panic. You should be getting a lot of results at this point. We're still keeping that really broad view. We want to get an idea of how big this topic is. Now, from there, we can start to narrow down our area of interest using narrower terms and defining concepts. So we started out with drug use among teenagers. Let's think about how we could possibly narrow that down. We could start to think about a specific type of drug use, or we could narrow our population down from teenagers to a more specific population. And we might come up with something like marijuana use among high school students. This is going to start kind of funneling down our topic. Now, step 4 is at this point, when we get a kind of good median topic, we can start to look at what the literature covers and what it doesn't cover. So let's say, for example, we're looking at marijuana use among high school students. And as we look through the literature, we start to see that there's not a lot of research on marijuana use among high school athletes. Well, that could be a really good lead. That might be something that we would want to pursue. So now we're getting much closer to that gap. So our step 5 would be at this point to look for opportunities to start to build on that existing research. So we're going to look for populations that have been under-researched, variables that haven't been explored, or even opportunities for further research. And what I mean by this is that you can actually type into the database further research. with your area of interest. And if you do that, you will get research articles that in their conclusion have suggestions for further research. And that will definitely point you in the direction of a solid gap. So we might kind of explore our narrowed down topic of marijuana use among high school athletes, and we might explore some of the variables that haven't been explored yet in the literature, such as marijuana use among high school athletes in Chicago. So at this point, I want to go over to the library and I'm going to kind of show you how to approach this through a database search, just to kind of do that really broad exploratory research. And then we'll come back and talk a little bit about how you select the literature to include in your literature review. So let's go over to the library homepage. And I'm going to start just with Thoreau. Now, Thoreau is our multi-database search tool. If you haven't used Thoreau before, it is right here on the library homepage. It's this very large Google-esque kind of search bar right here. And we recommend that you just start with one concept that is related to your topic. Pick the central concept and type it into this box, and then just make sure that the Thoreau box here is checked. So I'm going to type in drug use and then click the magnifying glass. Now, Thoreau searches about 80 to 85% of our databases that we have available in the library. So it doesn't search everything, and it's actually not a database. It's a multi-database search tool. So you can kind of think about it as Walden's Google. Now, the reason that I really want to point this out from the very beginning is that if you are doing dissertation research, in your dissertation, in your chapter 2, you're going to need to talk about your search criteria, how you found the information that you included in your dissertation in your literature review. Now, when you do that, you're going to need to keep track of the databases that you searched, the keywords that you searched, what kind of journals you looked at. If you had any other limiters set, you're going to want to mention those in your search criteria. The search criteria really is just a 1 to 2 page summary of how you found the information that you included in your dissertation. Now, when you do that, you will not be able to cite Thoreau because, again, Thoreau is not a database. It's a search tool. And the reason for that is that, when our search criteria, what we're doing is we're leaving kind of breadcrumbs for future researchers to pick up on your research where you left off. And if you use Thoreau or if you cite Thoreau, it's not going to do future researchers much good because Thoreau is only available to Walden faculty, students, and staff. So just as a disclaimer, as we move into Thoreau, you will have to eventually move out of Thoreau and into those subject-specific databases to do your literature review research. However, Thoreau can be a really great starting place for that exploratory research to just kind of feel out what literature is available on your topic and if you might be able to find something of a usable gap. So we're in Thoreau. We started with our very broad concept, drug use. And then we're going to select our limiters on the left-hand side to set our limiters for literature review research. We're going to want to uncheck the full text box and check the peer-reviewed scholarly journals box. Now, the reason that we do this is that if we were to keep the full text box checked, it would only bring back articles and books and dissertations that are available in full text at the Walden Library. Now, unfortunately, no library has everything, and when you're doing dissertation level research, you need to be able to see absolutely everything that's out there that you possibly can on your topic in order to come up with a comprehensive literature review and in order to petition for yourself to be considered an expert in the field. So we're going to uncheck that full text box. Now at this point, I like to check the peer-reviewed scholarly journals box because most of the information that you use in your literature review is going to come from peer-reviewed scholarly journals. And if we check this box at this point, it's going to give us a good idea of what the pool is of information that we have to pull from for our literature review. So now that we've checked those two boxes, we can search again and we can watch our search results go down. It's taking its time. A little bit slow today, just bear with me. There we go. Okay, so we have just double checking here, unchecked full text, checked peer review. Now we can start to kind of expand on that area of interest that we were talking about. So we had, oops. So our area of interest that we started with, our very broad topic, was drug use among teenagers. And we're going to start this process of narrowing down. So let's go back over to the Walden Library and we'll start with drug use and we'll do teenagers in the second box. What we like to do is keep one concept per search field. So that's why I'm going to separate these two out into drug use and then teenagers. And we'll click search and see what that does to our results. Okay, so now we have about 14,000. Now that's about what we would expect at this point. So let me show you, as we're running through this, what we can look at. So we have drug use among teenagers. We can expect thousands of articles. If we start narrowing down to marijuana use among high school students, we'll start to get hundreds of articles. Marijuana use among high school athletes should be dozens, as we're getting closer to that gap. And then marijuana use among high school athletes in Chicago should be close to zero. So let's test this theory and try it out in the databases. So here we have 14,000. So now let's start to narrow this down a little bit. Let's start with high school students. And see what that does to our results. Okay, so we've got 7,000. That narrowed that down quite a lot. Let's just look at marijuana. We'll leave off use for right now. Okay, so that dropped us about another 4,000. So now we're getting kind of closer. There's still a significant amount of research on this topic, but it is kind of starting to narrow it down a little bit more. Now let's see what happens if we type in athletes. Okay, so here we have 19. And then what would happen if we put in Chicago? Okay, so we have 0. So that's a pretty good indicator that we have found a gap. But the problem remains that we still need to have literature to pull from for our literature review. So just because there isn't literature on your exact topic does not mean that it's a total dead end. You can still absolutely do that research as long as it's a legitimate research question. But now you're kind of sitting here thinking, okay, well now I have nothing, so where am I supposed to get this literature from? So let's go back and look at our kind of strategy here. This is all of the different literature that came up through all of these different searches. So we probably have a combined number of articles here, probably somewhere in the 10,000s. So how do we know what articles we should pick to include into our literature review on this topic? Well, the answer to that question is that we want to kind of pull our articles from just about these levels. We want to get as close to our topic as we can to provide relevant current research on that topic. So once we have all this pool of literature that we can pull from for our literature review, we're going to start looking really critically at the literature that we want to include, and we're going to examine it to make sure that it fits the purpose of the literature review. So the literature review, I think a lot of students really think of it as, just a survey of the current literature on your topic. And that's not wrong, that is what it is. But the literature that you choose to include needs to provide evidence of a phenomenon in the field and evidence of a gap in the research regarding that phenomenon. And it also needs to provide justification for why your study needs to be done. So let's look at those two ideas a little bit closer. So when it comes to evidence, when we are looking for evidence that a phenomenon is significant to the field, we'll be able to tell because there will be a lot of research on that topic. So when we were looking at drug use among teenagers or even drug use among high school students, we were still seeing a really large selection of literature which tells us that this is a significant problem to the field. So some of the other topics that I've seen students look at are teacher burnout, coping mechanisms of patients with chronic illnesses, or successful leadership traits. So at this point, once we've identified a phenomenon that is significant to the field, we're going to start looking for evidence of that gap. So what we're looking for is that there's evidence that a phenomenon exists. We definitely know that because there's a large amount of research on that topic, but there's a specific aspect of that phenomenon that has not yet been studied. So it could be a specific population or group or geographical location, a certain variable, etc. So, for example, a student might develop these large, high-level areas of interest into gaps such as teacher burnout among first-year teachers in special education in North Carolina, coping mechanisms of type 1 diabetics who have been diabetic for over 20 years, successful leadership traits of individuals leading startup companies who manage employees remotely. So all of this evidence that we are collecting, evidence that the phenomenon is significant to the field and evidence that there's a gap, that something has yet to be researched on that topic, that's going to give us the justification for why our study should be done. So we're looking for a legitimate demand for research. It needs to be an authentic puzzle to be solved. So if you get yourself to this point and you think that you might have identified a good research topic, I would recommend at this point that you go over to the Center for Research Quality and you have a look at the Litmus Test. The Litmus Test is just a really streamlined checklist that will walk you through some steps to make sure that you do have a legitimate research problem. And you'll see here that it's exactly the things that we've been talking about. Is there evidence? Is it justified? Is it grounded in the literature, which is exactly what we were just looking at? You know, does it come from the literature in this sense? That's what it means to be grounded in the literature. So it's the Litmus test is a really great way for you to verify that you do have a good researchable question, and it can be something that you can share with your faculty members too, who you know, if they're looking for you know, evidence that you have a good research problem and that you've done your homework. You can definitely go through this checklist with them and run through your topic to make sure that it is going to be a good one. Okay, so I hope that you can kind of get a sense from this presentation that it is the literature that drives the research that we are going to do for the dissertations at Walden. Everything comes from that literature, and I know a lot of times students that I see kind of approach the dissertation from the perspective of, first, I'm going to come up with a research problem, then I'm going to go look for the literature to back up what I want to do. Now, you can certainly try that, that strategy. It will be a lot easier for you if you follow the literature to a good research problem. It will just, it'll be a more solid foundation for you to build your study on, and it's going to be easier for you to do. So I'm going to have a look and see if there are any questions that came in, and if there's anything particular that you would like to discuss. Or Julie, if there were any questions that came in?
Just one person wanted to point out to limit by date, but that we'll get to that eventually. And another person wanted a transcript of the webinar. So you can copy it from the captioning website, but there will be official transcript coming in the future.
Sure, yeah, let me go back and show you some dates. And that's to do a date search is totally fine at this point if you would like to do that. So let's go back a little bit. Let's back up to our one of our broader searches, such as marijuana in high school students. Okay. So you're right. Right now, we do have a really broad set of limiters here. We have full text is unchecked, peer review is checked, and it goes back to 1966. So we can definitely bring that up to date and have a look at what that does to our results. Okay, and that takes it down another notch. And you're right. If when we're doing exploratory research, use the limiters that you think are going to be the most useful to you. So if it helps you to uncheck peer-reviewed scholarly journals so that you can see other dissertations that have been written related to that topic, or if you want to see government reports or conference papers or books or background information. If that's helpful for you, definitely uncheck this peer-reviewed scholarly journals box and see what else comes up. Do whatever it is that's useful to you to get a sense of what might be available on your topic. Now, really quickly, when you kind of go through this process of Thoreau, the next thing you're going to do is to go over to your subject-specific databases, and Thoreau will actually give you a pretty decent starting point for that as well. So here we are in Thoreau, and we've got our really broad search going at the top. We have almost 2,000 results. If I look over here in the left-hand column under Refine Results and scroll down to the very bottom tab, I'll see a box marked Databases. And this is going to give me a list of all of the databases that these 2,000, almost 2,000 search results came from. So we'll see here Academic Search Complete, Social Sciences Citation, Citation Index, PsycInfo, CINAHL. This can give you a really great roadmap for moving forward on your literature review research. So what I would recommend at this point is have a look at the different databases that are recommended. Go ahead and jot down the first 10 or 15 and start there. Go into each one of those individual databases and repeat your search and see what kind of results you get. Okay, just having a look to see what other questions there might be. Yeah, so there's a comment here from Howard. It's the research question that drives the study is what students are told, and that's absolutely correct. The research study does, the research question absolutely does drive the study. It's what determines your methodology and your data collection and your data analysis. That's absolutely correct. But it's the literature review that drives the research question. The research question must be grounded in the literature. It's one of those checklist points that are here. So it needs to come from an existing body of research on that topic. Okay, so there's another question here about the 5-year requirement for your programs. So most of the rubrics state that you are going to need to, or that the vast majority of the information that you include in your literature review is going to come from peer-reviewed scholarly journals, and it's going to be from the past 5 years. If you find something that is really good, that is beyond that 5 years or is not peer-reviewed, there is a little bit of wiggle room. My suggestion at that point would be to make a case for yourself, make an argument as to why you think that should be included in your literature review, and then take that to your faculty member to make sure that that would be appropriate to do. If you do find that you have a topic, if you're going through this exploratory research process, and you're not finding a lot of current research from the past 5 years, maybe you're finding research from 10 or 15 years ago, then unfortunately you might need to reconsider your topic. One of the requirements for Walden dissertations is that they are built on current research. And the university is a little bit less flexible on that requirement. Okay, so here's a question that I think actually might be interesting to talk about. How about a situation in which you see a practical problem in your community, say violence among young people, for which I want to study the reasons, but there might not be much literature about it? That's a really great question. A lot of students do build their research question, their area of interest, their topic of interest, around observations that they have seen in their field or in their line of work. Um, and if that is the case, what I would say is start at that area of interest. Take it at the broadest level here. So what you're saying is that something that you're interested in is violence among young people. So there's your area of interest, violence among young people. And if you can, and if it's something that you see happening in your community, then maybe add to that community violence or interpersonal violence, or kind of, select sort of a level that you want to pursue. Start with that, and then go into the databases and do some exploratory research to see what kind of research has been done on violence among young people and communities. And then look at some of their suggestions for further research to see if, maybe they say we need to do more research on rural areas, or we need to do more research on this particular population. That can give you some really good leads for the research for your study.
We have another question. What happens when you do preliminary research check and found a lack of investigation on a topic? Like you think that there isn't anything written at all?
That's a great question too. Let's see, and then I'm reading the rest of this. Okay, so sometimes there can be definitely a lack of investigation on a topic, and I see this a lot happening with topics that are incredibly recent or very new. And a lot of times this is due to just the nature of scholarly research and the peer review process. The peer review process is a process by which articles undergo a kind of a quality assurance check. The articles are reviewed by other experts in the field for methodology, for research methods, to make sure everything is aligned, that everything is done correctly, that the research adheres to a very high standard. And that process can take sometimes between 9-15 months. So if we have a really, really new topic, there might be a lack of research, and that doesn't mean that it's not worthy of research. It's just that sometimes scholarly literature is slow. It's just a slow-moving beast. If you, otherwise, if you do have a topic that that's not recent or really new, but you're still just not finding a lot of current research on, at that point, maybe talk to your faculty about what they think, if that's something that you can pursue, if there's enough background there. Again, you can take your topic and kind of zoom out to, the larger areas of interest and look to see if there's any information about these kind of broader areas of interest, look at the literature and the research there, and then see what direction the literature is going, and then follow where the literature takes you. Now, you might end up with a different research question than you originally set out to do, but it's a research question that is grounded in the literature, and that's going to give you that evidence and justification that you need to do your study. It's going to be really hard to do a study if there is no demand for that study to be done coming from the literature and coming from the field.
But I would caution everyone, if you're not finding anything on it, that might be a good time for you to set up a doctoral research session with a subject specialist librarian, because you may be stuck on keywords that are not going to find your topic, and the librarian can help you work through a strategy and make sure that you're not missing things there.
Yeah. So there's another question in here. When you find the gap, wouldn't the literature on that gap be limited? Yes, yes, absolutely, it would. So let's go back to our list here. So this is our search strategy that we used. We started with a really broad topic. We had tens of thousands of articles, and then as we narrowed down the topic, we found less and less research until when we got to our gap, we had 0 results. So yes, when you find your gap, you will have very, very few articles, if any, that report on that exact topic. That's the nature of a gap. I think what students often find is that they start here, and then when they type this into the database and they get 0, they think, oh my gosh, well, I found a gap, but now I don't have any literature. So what I'm trying to show you here is how to, start broad, narrow down to a gap so that you have this whole trail of literature behind you closing in on your gap that you can pull from for your literature review, that's going to give you the information that you need to support why your study should be done. Okay. Okay, so yeah, Julie was just answering this question too. I was looking at this one question about, having, can I just scan through the abstracts in journals on my topic to find out what has not yet been done? You can certainly try that as a tool. That can't be your entire strategy, but yeah, sure, you could start with, let's say you wanted to start with marijuana use among high school students. You could actually type that into the database. Let's actually try it out. So marijuana use, high school students. We've unchecked the full text box. We're going to check the peer review scholarly journals box. We're going to bring up the publication date limiter to 2010. And then we can actually just type into a box here, further research. And what this will do is it will bring up any research articles that in the conclusion talk about suggestions for further research. So yes, if you are looking for a gap, this is a good way to start trying to determine where the field is going itself, where the literature is going, where there is a legitimate demand for research. So what you can do at this point is, once you have an article that you think has a suggestion for further research that you think is really interesting, is you can use citation chaining to see if anyone followed up on that research idea and actually went through and did another study. So for example, we can look at this article on prescription opioid abuse, and I'm going to copy and paste it into Google Scholar. And once I have the record pulled up here, I'll see a link below that says cited by. And when I click on this, it's going to give me a pretty complete list of all of the books and articles that have cited that article since its publication. So if there was a suggestion for further research in this article, we could have a look at these other studies to see if anyone followed up on that idea.
And this is really only going to give you the published research. Since this is a healthcare related topic, you might also want to go to clinicaltrials.gov, and that will tell you all the research that is in process right now. There's hundreds and hundreds of marijuana studies in process at the moment.
Okay. So there's another question here about, what do you do if you feel like your research is really moving into completely new territory and there's not a body of literature behind it. That's a really difficult situation to be in, and one that you should definitely talk to your faculty about. The guidelines for Walden dissertations are pretty clear that your study does need to be grounded in the literature and come from this body of current research. And if it does not, it's an extremely difficult approach to take. It requires a lot more work than the kind of dissertations that we do here at Walden. And again, it's just one of those things where the rubric does really clearly state that it needs to be grounded in the literature. So if you aren't finding anything on that current topic, you might want to rethink it. So talk to your faculty. Also, you can make an appointment with us to talk to a subject specialist librarian to get help in figuring out if there is really nothing on that topic or if somehow we can find some good literature for you. Okay, here's the million-dollar question. What's the acceptable amount of studies for the dissertation? So references for the dissertation or for the literature review. Unfortunately, the answer really is as many as it takes. So I'm the psychology librarian, and I've seen psychology Ph.D. dissertations come out, some that are 130 pages long, some that are 404 pages long. And as you might imagine, the number of references varies wildly from one end of the spectrum to another. It really does depend on the body of current literature that is behind your topic. Some of it might be more if it's a well-established topic, such as marijuana use among high school students. It might be a much less amount of scholarly research if it's a newer topic, such as police violence or mass shootings or some current issues that we're seeing. Some of the things that you can do to kind of get some guidelines is that you can go and have a look at other dissertations that have been conferred that are related to your topic, get an idea of how long their literature review is, how many references they cite. And then you can also, let's see, is there another way to do that? You can also have a look at our exhausting the literature checklist, which will make sure that you have covered all your bases and that you're not missing any literature that might be out there hiding. Let me pull it up for you and I will put it in the chat box. This is a checklist that we use for another webinar that goes through a lot of the strategies that we use for finding literature, such as using other databases, using citation chaining, which I just showed you, using keywords, looking for full text, creating an alert. And if any of these are unfamiliar to you, you can follow the link and get more information on how to do that. Oh, so here's a great question about articles that have been published in 2018. Just a word of advice as you're going through the database searches. One of the reasons that I ask that you uncheck that full text box when you start your search is so that you're not missing anything that might have been published in 2018 or 2017 that is still under the publisher's digital embargo. So some publishers have an embargo on releasing the PDF or the HTML version of the article until after the print version has been available for 6 months, 12 months. They have varying lengths. So what would happen is if you check that full text box and then you did a search and you found an article that was under embargo, it would not show up as being here in full text and you might not see it. So definitely uncheck that full text box. Now, what happens if you do get in that situation, though, and you want to get the copy of an article that is not available in full text at the library. Well, you could go to Google Scholar and just copy and paste the title in there and see if it's maybe available freely on the web. You could at least have a look at it. Otherwise, you can go to the library homepage, and under Services, you will see a link to Document Delivery Service. This is just a simple form that you can fill out to request that Walden have a look and see if we can find that article for you from a partner institution. And then in some cases, we will purchase the article on behalf of the student if it's under a certain amount. Now, while we're here, I should mention that Document Delivery Service does have a limit of 30 articles per lifetime per user. I've only seen 1 or 2 students get anywhere close to that, so I wouldn't panic, but I would also just be cautious when you're putting in your request to Document Delivery Service. Make sure you read the abstract and that it's an article that you really truly are interested in so that you don't get close to that limit. Again, you just click into sign into DDS. It's a really simple form you fill out with some contact information and the citation information for the article that you're looking for. That request goes to the collections librarian, and then we will see if we can get a copy for you. Either way, you'll hear back in about 7 to 10 days. We'll send you either the PDF of the article, or we'll say we're sorry we weren't able to get that for you, and we will give you some options for looking at your local libraries to see if maybe you can find it there. Okay, what about non-peer-reviewed information that come from credible sources like the World Bank or United Nations publications? Again, that would be kind of within that wiggle room of what's allowed in the literature review. If you have something that is, a government report that has a statistic that you would like to include, you can do that. The literature review is mostly a place to talk about the current research that is happening regarding your topic. So usually you don't see a lot of background information in that. You'll see that information more in chapter 1. So if you're looking for background information or statistics or government documents, you probably will be using those in your dissertation. You'll just be using them in a different place. Okay, here's a question. How are you getting these subtopics? Let's see, let me pull up so these different subtopics. That's a good question. So we started with our area of interest, which was drug use among teenagers. We're trying to stay really broad. And then really this was just me brainstorming and trying to think of how can I narrow down this really massive topic to get towards a gap, to get towards some research that hasn't been done yet. And I really just started by brainstorming what are narrower terms or what are synonyms so that I could use to try to see if I can narrow this down. So I was able to narrow down drug use to marijuana use, and then I was able to narrow down teenagers to high school students, then to an even narrower population, high school student athletes, and then the most narrow population, which was high school student athletes in Chicago. This was really just me brainstorming. It doesn't have to be, there's no right answer, let me put it that way. I trust all of your judgments to start with your area of interest and do your own kind of investigative work to find out what a good, viable, narrower topic would be.
Okay, we had a great question from Kimberly. What if you find a gap that you're approaching the gap in a different country outside of the United States and there is no empirical evidence in that country to support your topic? What do? That came up recently with one of my students, and they were very focused. They really wanted to find something in Nigeria specifically, and they were having a lot of trouble with that. And so we pulled out, though, to make it a little broader, we said West Africa, and that found quite a bit. So if you can go out farther in your geography, you may be able to find something that fits your topic.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Julie. Yeah, unfortunately, that is a problem oftentimes with international research, especially if we're looking at developing or underdeveloped countries, that there is not a lot of scholarly research published on all of these topics. And you're right, if you can kind of back up and zoom out a little bit and go a little bit broader, oftentimes you can find enough of that evidence that you'll need to explain why there is a demand for your study. There's a question about theoretical framework. So theoretical framework, the question is, how recent does a theoretical framework need to be? As far as I know, there is not a date limiter on theoretical framework. You should be able to use, as long as the framework is reputable and has a basis in the literature, then it should be acceptable. And if you have any questions about that, that would definitely be a question for your faculty member. So we're just about out of time. I want to go over to the library homepage really quick and give you some options for where to go to get help. I know a lot of you had a lot of really great questions, and I want to show you some resources that are available to help you get answers to some of those. So the first thing that I want you to think about where, in terms of getting help from the library homepage is our quick answers. Quick Answers is our university-wide FAQ, and the library has a really great Quick Answers. You can get to Quick Answers two different ways. You can either click the Search Everything button, which will search Quick Answers, and you can just type your question right into here, or you can go to our Get Help section, and you'll see that there's a box right here. Now, we've done a really fantastic job making a really robust Quick Answers for the library, and we have guides on just about every aspect of library research that you might encounter. So let me just show you a quick example. Let's say that you find an article in Google Scholar that you're not sure if it's peer-reviewed or not. You could just type in verify peer review, and you will get a nice little quick guide on how to do that particular thing. We'll give you step-by-step process and even a super short video that just really quickly shows you how to do that exact thing. So Quick Answers is really great to get you an answer to a question without having to wait for anybody. But if you do have a question that you can't answer through Quick Answers, or if you need some more detailed research help, feel free to reach out to us at Ask a Librarian. We have an email form, which is really easy to use. We also have a few chat hours that are available every day. You can also call us on the phone and leave a voicemail. And what we'll do is that we will respond via email to your question. As doctoral students, you can also make a doctoral research appointment with one of our liaison librarians. Just go here, select your college and your school. We'll go to my calendar since I'm here. Okay. And then you'll get access to your liaison's calendar, and you can have a look at available upcoming appointments. We add new appointment slots at the last month or the last week of the month. And if for some reason the librarian is fully booked for that month, you can also try to make an appointment with one of our doctoral research librarians. Let's see, one more thing I want to show you for getting help, which is our recorded webinar archive. So we have a pretty big webinar archive, again, on all things having to do with library research. We also have subject-specific webinars. But if you're interested in topics, if you're interested in literature review specific webinars, you can just scroll through here and you'll find that there are a number of ones that look at different library tips, look at different aspects such as developing a search strategy or staying organized or exhausting the literature. We have webinars that are on citation management software. A lot of webinars designed to help you through the process of doing library research for your literature review. So I hope that this has been really informative to you and that you will be able to walk away from today's session, with a clear idea of where you are in this process and where you need to go and what you need to do to find a gap. Again, if you need any further assistance, please reach out to us. We have a whole team of librarians who are here to help you. I want to wish you all good luck in your studies and have a really good term and a really good semester. Thank you so much, and goodbye.